Hello and welcome, Buddy here at House of Props. This week's build is this Uruk Scout helmet as seen in the Fellowship and the Two Towers. We first get to see the helmet make an appearance on Amon and again with the Uruk troop which hobbitnapped Merry and Pippin. Since the helmets are meant to be for scouts, which they are expected to move fast, the design is meant to be on the lighter side, so it is molded leather with metal supports. But in the case of this version, I built the entire helmet with EVA foam. I've posted a link to the template in the below description if you want to build one along with me. Let's head to the shop and get started. I begin by cutting out two part A's and apply contact cement to the longer straight edge on each piece. This will be the center line of the helmet. To speed up the drying process, I use the heat gun to cure the cement to the point where it loses its wet shine. The pieces won't stick together well if the cement is too wet or too dry. It needs to be just right, and I found the sweet spot to be the moment when the shine has disappeared. Then the two prepared edges can be pressed together. Once attached, I heat the seam area up with the heat gun, so I can pinch and mold this area to create a ridge in the foam. The seam may try to open up again, but you should be fine if you continue to apply pressure as it cools. Next, part B can be attached to the other straight edge on each part A. Now, part B is meant to look like metal when we're through, and these areas stick above the leather. So as I'm attaching the part B's, I'm offsetting the edges slightly in order to make part B sit higher than part A. After each part B is attached, two part C's can then go on, and since they are meant to be leather, they sit lower than the part B, so yet again, I'm offsetting the edges. Once the C's are attached to each other along the center line, I use the heat gun to crimp the seam just like part A. While I heat it up and shape it, I would really appreciate it if you would click the subscribe button if you haven't already. It's completely free to you and will help my channel grow. Plus, if you click the notification bell, you can customize your notifications so you never miss a project. Thank you! Now, as I was building this, I realized I made this area too big on the part C pattern, so I have trimmed away the unneeded excess, and the template has been fixed to match the final shape. Part D is metal and means the edges can align to the edge of part B, but part C is still offset from it. Now, for these pieces, don't attach them along the center line. Part E is leather, so it gets offset from this edge on part B, but the two part E's can be attached along their center line. Part F is this triangle shape, and down its center I have carved out a groove. This is to create a bend in the foam when it is glued into place where we left the gap between the part D's. Part G is cut from some 10mm foam and then beveled with a Dremel to create the wedge shape. And in order for the piece to sit nicely on the helmet, I'm carving a slight channel into the bottom. This will allow the piece to sit snugly on the bend in part F, and the narrow part of the wedge points down the nose. Part H consists of a bunch of 4mm foam rivets. Each side of the helmet gets 11 glued onto the metal foam pieces, and I simply attach these with some CA glue. At this point, the foam can be heat sealed, and to do this I waft a heat gun over the foam. You can see a little how the foam is slightly getting darker. This is the pores in the foam closing up, and by heat sealing it, it'll allow the foam to receive paint and primer better than if we had left it porous. Okay, so the entire helmet is heat sealed, but I want to give the leather areas some slight texture, and to do that I hit the pieces again with the heat gun, and while the foam is still warm, I press a crumpled up piece of aluminum foil into it, and it leaves behind this amazing dimpled texture which is reminiscent of a rough cured leather. On the part C pieces, I'm cutting a slit like this with an X-Acto blade. I'm not cutting all the way through, just creating a slit. Then I hit these areas with the heat gun and the slit will slightly open up because when I'm done, these areas will look like two pieces of leather that have been stitched together. And while the foam is still warm, I press the aluminum foil into the surface. Okay, up next is adding the stitching, and for that I'm using an upholstery needle with some crochet thread. This will be used on the slit areas, here on the seam, and around this bottom edge of the part A's. I'm literally just sewing the thread through the foam, just like I would for repairing tears in clothes. When finished, the stitching is looking like this. Now, I want to hide the center seam on the top of the helmet, and to fill that in, I'm using Quick Seal. I smear it on with a palette knife and then dip my finger into water to blend it smooth. While that's drying, I round over the rivets to look more like domes rather than cylinders. It's up to you how much you want to take off. And since I already had the Dremel out, I figured I might as well add some battle damage to the helmet. Now it's time to give the helmet a layer of Plasti Dip. This will help seal up the foam, give the paint and texture a nice layer to stick to, and it remains flexible. I'm going to spray a thick, even layer and allow that to cure for a couple of hours. Then once that layer is cured, I'm going to use some silicone caulk and give the metal areas my texture technique like I used on previous Uruk helmets. I begin by smearing on an uneven layer of the caulk and then press the palette knife into it and lift straight up, which creates these points. Then I lightly pull the points down, leaving behind this rough cast iron finish. This caulk will turn clear when it dries, and once it's completely cured, I'll hit it again with another coat of the Plasti Dip. This way the caulk is sealed in between the layers. Now it's time for paint, and the leather areas I'm going to base in this raw sienna. Since this lighter color is being applied to a black base, most likely it'll need more than one coat. And it turns out I was right, so I ended up applying a second coat of the raw sienna, and this time I made my brush marks more uneven, sporadic, and multi-dimensional. This way it'll add a little bit of texture to the paint and help hide the brush marks before continuing to make it look like leather. The textured metal areas can be based with a charcoal gray, and I'm making sure to work the paint into all the texture. Next, I take some Tuscan red and darken it by adding some burnt umber. I then thin this with some water and brush this onto the leather areas of the helmet. Then using a crumpled paper towel, I pounce the area to blend the wash, and it also creates a nice leather dimple texture on the surface as well. Then I brush some metallic tin onto the dry charcoal gray. I'm not aiming for full coverage, just trying to really catch the high points of the texture. Then I blend it with the paper towel. This just helps even it out and remove any visible brush marks. Next up is a burnt umber wash. I'm applying this to the leather around the seams and in the creases. This will help to add some aging to the helmet. The wash is blended with the paper towel, and more paint can be added in areas where you want to add more grime. Once that wash is dry, I then repeat the same process with a black wash. This time, this wash can be applied to both the leather and the metal. It adds more grime to the leather because the black blends nicely into the browns, and it helps tone down the metallic shine on the metal to make it look more like steel. Then after that, the umber wash can be applied to the areas of the metal to add more grime on top of the metal surface. This can be very sporadic and random. For the last paint step, I'm using the raw sienna to add some rust around the rivets. I dab it to blend it just a little bit, and this is looking really bright right now, but it will darken as it dries just like acrylics do. And then the Uruk Scout helmet is finished. I found this to be a great addition to the Uruk collection. The metal texture helps tie it into the others, but the leather bits make it special and unique to stand out on its own. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Check out my other Uruk themed builds. Again, there's a link in the description if you want to make one. Please share this video with all your friends and family. Subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day. And remember, if you are building any of my builds or using any of my templates, feel free and tag me at House of Props on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, because I would really like to see your fantastic work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.